the reason we're here tonight, we're going to go ahead and get started. The reason we're here tonight is to talk about a photo project that several of us in the room are working on. It's a project to document the final days of the Trump administration, the Trump presidency, and the beginning of the Biden-Harris administration. The project is called Transition, the End of an Unprecedented 4 Years. Now, the title harkens back to our project 4 years ago, which was called Unprecedented, the inauguration of Donald J. Trump and the People's Response. And that book centered around the 3 days of the inauguration. And the book, which I should have a copy of it somewhere around here, that book was just about the 3 days of the inauguration. And a lot of the people in this call tonight were contributors to this book. The book that we're working on, Transition, is going to be a little bit wider in scope. It's going to go from October, which covers the early voting period, all the way through Inauguration Day. So that's why we call it Transition. We're documenting the transition of power. So let's just dive right into yesterday's events, okay? I'm going to flip around a little bit because I know there's folks here that I see Lloyd on my screen. I see Chris on my screen. I know that Mukul was there yesterday, so I don't see you, Mukul. If you're here, drop something in chat.
I'm here.
Great. Let's start with Chris. I saw some of your photos from the from yesterday's event, and you were obviously part of our inauguration coverage in 2017. You know, the images I've seen from not only photographers in this call, but the one of the great images, that some that are gonna, you know, be iconic from yesterday. You know, it's still sort of hard to believe, still sort of hard to get my mind around what happened. And you know, would have never expected to see something like this, you know, in my lifetime. But then again, 4 years ago, I would have never expected to see what happened in DC on Inauguration Day, that the inauguration of an American president would include riots in the streets of DC, police firing rubber bullets and flashbang canisters into the crowds. So that you know, that was I was completely shocked back then as well to be witnessing that on Inauguration Day. Let's start with Chris. Chris, you were there on Inauguration Day. You were in the middle of it then. You were in the middle of it yesterday. Compare the two, and you know, most of us here just, you know, have impressions of what we saw on TV. But you were there. What was going through your mind as the events were unfolding?
Well, if I was to compare the two, the inauguration rioting was, while intense, it was definitely less people involved in doing the rioting. Whereas on Capitol Hill, it was thousands upon thousands. I mean, I have no idea how many people. And you know, if you look at, I mean, one of the images that I took, which is kind of me on the Capitol steps looking back towards the monument, it's basically almost looks as packed as Trump's inauguration. So there is just way many people there than there was participating in riotous activities, if you will, than there were during the 2017 inauguration. So, and then also it was like kind of polar opposites in terms of politics, where it was, you know, mostly kind of, you know, black bloc type, Antifa type folks in 2017, and this was all, you know, the Trump supporters this time round. So, and I, you know, one thing I found interesting is that they both seem to use a lot of the same tactics. So I guess they've learned from each other a little bit. but yeah, so it was way more intense. You know, no one was you know, trying to breach a federal building back in 2017. It was mostly directed at, you know, corporation storefront type things, anti-capitalism type stuff, where this was directed towards the federal government. So yeah, those are, you know, pretty big differences, I think. And you know, in the, you know, the police response, I would argue was the same, but in terms of things like tear gas and flashbangs and rubber bullets, because all of those were used yesterday. Um, but you know, it was just like, you know, 50 times more people participating in it. So
Mukul, you were there as well. Let me ask you, what was your sense? Do you feel like it was an organized thing that people knew ahead of time that they were going to do this? I mean, some of the stories that I heard were that people actually brought like rappelling equipment. What were your thoughts? Because I imagine that you were there maybe on the mall and followed them to the Capitol. What was going through your mind?
First, yeah, I just want to say I pretty much agree with Chris's assessment. It was comparing the two, I had the exact same impression. I don't think it was organized. I heard later on that this was the QAnon group that basically instigated it, and then it's kind of a mob mentality that once somebody starts something, the mob just follows them. While I was walking from the White House towards the Capitol, there were people, you know, going among the crowd saying, "Spread the word. We're going to take the Capitol. You know, spread the word." And it turned out a bunch of these guys were QAnon people who were just sort of instigating others into doing this, and, you know, saying things like, "It's our house. They can't stop us. What are they going to do?" You know, that kind of stuff. Just sort of revving people up. So I don't think a lot of people came there with the intention of doing this. A lot of people came to march. Afterwards, I saw some people really have heated arguments with some of the people who were going inside, saying that you've basically screwed everything up from here on out. It's basically over for Trump and for this, you know, presidency, and for whatever hopes you had, because you've screwed it up badly. So there was a split between them. But I think, you know, like I've been in a number of mobs in different places, you know, in different countries. A mob mentality is just unpredictable. You know, it's like once something takes hold, people just follow that, you know, whichever way it'll go. So
Lloyd, you were also there, Lloyd. You know, my perception was that there was some people in there doing violent things, but for most of the scenes I was seeing on TV, there wasn't a lot of visible violence that I was seeing. What describe the scene and sort of the mood that you were witnessing? I think you're on mute, Lloyd.
I was on the other, thanks, Joe, and thanks, Chris and Carl. I was on the east side of the Capitol. The scene was somewhat different. They were a little smaller. When I first got there, it was actually 1,000 people, a few hundred, I don't know. And then after the group came up from the mall, you know, from the Ellipse, at a few thousand. I think the big groups were on the west side of the mall side.
Were people angry? I mean, was there a lot of anger?
Well, it was interesting. They were more just I've covered a lot of demonstrations in my day, including of people I don't agree with. And, you know, they were just, you know, I didn't agree with them. I didn't care for them, blah, blah, blah. But they were, you know, noisy and making, you know, expressing their opinion. And much like McCall said. And then the larger group came up, or I guess even before that, they heard Trump's speech. People were broadcasting on their phones and on other devices, and the tone turned darker and angrier during that long speech. I mean, I only heard bits of it, but what I heard was his voice just nauseates me. But, you know, I listened. And then I concur that it didn't appear planned. I heard nothing about breaking, and I was, you know, there's a police barrier outside the plaza, you know, when the dignitaries come in, and people seem to be respecting it. And then, like McCall said, it began, I don't know who started it, but about 50 people, I think it started on our side, broke through the barrier, and there was a sort of collective gasp. And there were only half a dozen cops max in the plaza, maybe a dozen on those center stairs. And then within a space of 30 seconds, a minute, a tidal wave went through.
Yeah, I want to
And they
address it.
swarmed up, and the cops were able to hold the door. They threw flashbangs, and the mood got uglier. I mean, it was like a bunch of howler monkeys, and they were jumping on police vehicles and screaming all kinds of stuff. And you know, my father grew up under the Nazis, so in Frankfurt, and I caught myself. I stayed cool and collected. I'm a professional, but part of me is going, this is what my father dealt with, with the Sturmabteilung, the German brown shirts under Hitler, and I kept firing, but it did not. We heard about the breach on our side, but just people. It was like people getting on their phones. I have a pass to the Capitol. I chose not to go in. I'm not sure I could have gotten in, actually. At the point, the guards were too tied up with crowd control.
I want to address one of the questions in the chat. Glenn Rugga with Zeke Magazine. Hey, Glenn, how are you? He put in the chat, what do I mean by not much physical violence? Obviously, there was violence there. I'm talking about sort of the video feed that I was watching was from the outer part of the crowd. And a lot of that just looked like people kind of hanging out, mingling. I know that the dynamic much closer to the Capitol and around the Capitol was probably a lot different than what the TV, what I'm watching on CNN or Fox. Actually watched Fox yesterday for a lot of this coverage. What was happening, it almost looked like people were just kind of milling on the outskirts. So that's what I was curious about, like what was going on a little bit closer into the
when they confronted the cops, it was rougher, but it wasn't. I felt no intimidation myself. I saw one guy with a bloody head at the very end. He'd been injured. I don't know how that happened. He was being interviewed by some Trump.
But to any of y'all that were there yesterday, what was the? But there were no counter protesters there, right? So there were no counter protesters. So there was no. There might have been there was some violence, but there was not the kind of confrontations that we might be seeing in some places.
Joe, if I can just add a little bit to that. So in terms of the violence, I agree with you that it was not as violent as, say, the inauguration. It was very focused. When they were trying to get in, they would fight the cops, but it wasn't like widespread violence all over the place. It was just when they were trying to get in, they would fight the cops, or when the cops pushed back, they would push the cops back, or they even maced the cops, which I was surprised to see. I saw a bunch of cops with the eyes all like messed up. So they would push back there. So it was between the police and the people on the front line, but the rest of the crowd was basically sitting in the back, picnicking, and talking, singing, whatever. So it wasn't like during inauguration where there was this chaos all over the place.
As someone that was on the west side, on the front line, there was actually quite a bit of violence. There was, I saw several members of the media dragged off and beaten by the protesters. Police were firing rubber bullets. One of my photos that I posted is the guy's bleeding from his face, but he got hit with a rubber bullet right here. But and then I saw a couple of people outed as Antifa. I guess there was, I can't say for sure that they were, but they were also dragged off and beaten as well. But this was all on the west side, and that was, Lloyd, it's interesting. You were on the other on the east side, and that's where I thought the breach happened, because there was no breach actually into the building that I saw from the west side.
If it happened
at all.
If it happened, Chris,
there was a breach on the west side too.
That's where it was. It was the west side.
Yeah.
It was the west side?
Yeah,
I'm curious where it was, because I was there the whole time, and the first breach was the scaffolding on the left-hand side.
Yeah.
but that scaffolding didn't really, it led to, I guess you had to kind of hop like a ledge to get onto the actual Capitol from that scaffolding. So, and they were pretty much kept on there. And then they broke through the barrier and then started going for then they started going up the steps to the door. But, you know, by the end of the day, they were still trying to get through that door at 6 p.m.
Let me redirect
the
this
main
to-
breach was on the first platform on the west side, you know, in the middle of the thing. There was like a archway and people were going, like hundreds of people were going through that.
Really?
Hold on a second with the conversation. I want to dial back a little bit to something Chris described in images of the media, of people witnessing people, media members being pulled and back and beaten. And I think one of the things when we talk about, a lot of us here in this room have covered protests. Anyone that's in DC who's a photographer has probably shot a protest at one point or another. And we've seen a lot of things happen in the city. And it's I'm curious to hear from, and let's get Arpita, you're here. I think I saw you in the crowd. How have things changed since, you know, before the Inauguration Day? I'd covered many protests and I never seen the level of violence that we saw on Inauguration Day. But since then, what has, you know, how have you seen things change in the city and at the protests you've attended? You might have to take yourself off mute, RP. You there? Anybody else want to? Victoria, I see you go to a lot of these protests. Do you want to chime in? Take yourself off mute.
Hey, Joe.
I would say the first time I really felt a bit uncomfortable and in fact restrained from taking photos was the night before last, when we went around to the Capitol and drove around the ellipse. But walking around the Capitol and the Supreme Court was really about the first time that I felt like taking out my camera was a liability. There were only pockets of Trump people there for the next day, but it still was a very eerie feeling of protesters or demonstrators or rioters who did not want their photo taken. So it was different from before, I think.
Jeffrey, you wanted to say something about the personal safety issue?
Yeah, a couple things. Not so much personal safety, but just violence in general. My experience of the inauguration in 2017 was a little bit different. Yeah, you could find violence all over the place, but I attended the largest anti-Trump rally on, I can't remember if it was Farragut or McPherson Square, and also the largest march. And there was no violence the entire day. There was at the 11th and 12th thing where they sort of, the Antifa guys sort of ambushed the march and got them trapped into that one area around 11th Street. But there was a lot of places where there was absolutely no violence and it was just peaceful demonstration. So there was sporadic violence all over. As far as since then, there have been a couple of anti-immigrant marches and then one Nazi march those were the first times that I felt really ill at ease as far as my own safety goes, that I could not get out, that if something happened, I would not be able to get out. And there was a lot of threats, a lot of people pushing back and a lot of the, they weren't Proud Boys, but Proud Boy types trying to instigate the other people, and especially photographers, getting in photographers' lenses and pushing them away, while other ones of them were showing off the photographers. So that I saw a lot of since then, but it was usually more at the more racially or ethnically provoked marches than the purely political ones.
Well, what I really kind of want to hear, because we all know, that there's violence out there, but how, as photographers, have you changed or evolved your approach to covering these events? Back before Inauguration Day, I would have never thought, even considered that maybe I should go get a helmet and wear that out, or even a flak jacket, who knows. But but after that, at least it was it was in my mind that, okay, you just never know what's gonna occur. Chris or Muko, I would love to hear what your thoughts are on how you may have changed, or maybe nothing's changed as far as your approach.
I think now you have to more kind of pick a side that you want to cover, and dress appropriately for that side, so it looks like you kind of belong with them. I've had run-ins with I've had more run-ins with Antifa types than I have had with Trump supporters. The Antifa people are really paranoid about having their photos taken, and they get quite pissy about it. Even stuff I posted online, even if someone's face is not visible, they're still upset about it because it can provide clues for the feds or what have you. Trump people may not be as involved, but now that the FBI is asking for everyone to submit their photos, they'll probably be a lot more sensitive to that sort of thing. But I found, like, you can't really, if it's fascist versus the Antifa folks, it's like, I don't think it's really hard to not pick kind of one side to sort of stick with, to shoot from that perspective, because the moment you kind of cross over and then the Antifa person goes, hey, we saw you with the Trump people, or vice versa, I mean, and also, I don't recommend proclaiming your media at all. I mean, I had several people yesterday, like, asking me what I'm doing, and asking me if I was with the media or whatever. I'm like, no, I'm just here for myself, which was fine enough of an answer for them. And one thing that was really quite funny is one dude goes, "Whoa, manual focus. We know you're not with the media." But I don't know. That's what I would recommend. I mean, it's because it is really sort of not that safe, because the people are now targeting the media on both sides of this stuff, and it's really kind of I think it's safer to be not really aligned, but aligned with documenting one side as opposed to the other, because otherwise you can easily be seen as a traitor by either side.
Muko,
yeah, so I just want to address the helmet.
Well, hold on one second. Let me just tee you up a little bit.
Okay.
Chris is a white guy. He can easily kind of go in that crowd. You, as I am, are a brown man. What are your thoughts about? And I see you shoot a lot of the Trump and Proud Boy stuff, and you're always in the middle of the action. So tell me about how you feel and what steps you take to keep yourself safe.
So I always go in with an open mind. I try not to feel anything about people, not prejudge them, and I think that sort of helps. So most of the time, the Trump people have been extremely friendly, open. They've asked me, like they asked Chris, "Who are you? What are you doing here? Are you with media?" And I tell them, "No, I'm not media," which I'm honestly not. And that's usually enough for them. Then some people have asked me, "Do you have a website? Do you have a card?" So if I have one with me, I'll show them that. And it's enough for them to know that, you're not really CNN or MSNBC or something like that. So yeah, in that sense, people have been pretty open-minded. I don't think the color issue plays that much into it, although of course there is a racist element in there. So you have to sort of be on guard. One incident I'd sort of like to illustrate the difference between the Antifa and these folks. So I've seen Antifa being really, really aggressive about not being photographed. I saw them break a guy's camera right in front of me. It's got so unpleasant that I basically stopped photographing them. So I avoid them more than I avoid the Trump people. At the last Trump rally, not this one, but the one that happened a few weeks ago, there was a bunch of Proud Boys who had collected near the monument. There was no media there, so they were just talking among each other. So there were some photographers there. I don't think there were media, but there were just some people, independent photographers, shooting them. Some of the guys started getting aggressive with them, So one of the leaders of the Proud Boys went up and just berated the Proud Boys. And he said, "Look, you're here in a public space. When you came here to Washington, D.C. to protest, you agreed to be photographed. And I was just taken aback. I've never seen anybody from the Antifa side say that. So he told these guys, if you don't want to be photographed, you shouldn't have come. If you don't want your face to be shown, put your mask on. So he was very, very curt with these people, and they basically backed off from the photographers after that. So it's there's good on both sides and there's bad on both sides.
I'd love to hear from some of the women photographers in the audience, whether you worked on our books or working on this book, or if you're just out there shooting. If you've got a perspective on keeping yourself safe while shooting these protests, I'd love to hear it. I saw Sue Dorfman up there. You got some? Do you have a perspective? I also
Yeah.
see. Go ahead, Sue.
Yeah, I want to say one thing about Antifa. I don't trust them. I do not trust that there's not agent provocateurs in there. I don't trust that there's not people that are set up by the Trump administration. I come out of a background where I still remember what happened in the 70s. And so I don't go near them because for a whole range of reasons, I just don't trust Antifa, but that's it. That's Antifa. I'm a 5'1" short, older, white Jewish woman. And people tend to kind of in some ways dismiss me, or they think, or that I'm disarming, and I smile. And I have actually really enjoyed going in and photographing the Trump trains and the Trump people getting on buses, because I have to look at everybody as human beings first. And I think it makes a huge difference. That said, I also value my safety, and if something really does not look safe, I will run away. Sometimes I'm very disappointed in myself, but I much prefer to be able to shoot another day than to find myself in the middle of a field of action. And I think some of it just having from been in places where there has been real violence, and if there's real violence where your life really is on the line, it's just not worth getting your life on the line for a rally.
How about the whole issue of helmets? Anybody here ever, or do you wear a helmet, or would you consider wearing a helmet? Does that cross your mind? I'd love to hear some thoughts. And again, if you're, if you worked on our book, great. If you haven't, that's fine too. If you've got a thought on this, please unmute yourself and give us some thoughts.
Lloyd, I thought you were raising your hand. Were you going to say something?
I am. I considered it this time, but it was not necessary. I was also talking to someone who was wearing one. He said they're very hard to get right now. Everybody, they're back ordered like months.
Do you think it makes you a target?
I think it would have made me look like a Trumper in this case. I didn't need it. I've been photographing demonstrations since 1973. My first one was Nixon's first counter-inaugural. I think people are more antagonistic to media than they were. I agree with the 2 or 3 other folks that are saying Antifa's, they're a pain in the butt. They like to run riot. I also wonder about if some of them are plants. Ms. Dorfman, I had some of those experiences younger too, with not knowing who's really who. I wore my credentials yesterday, but they're just say they're Hill Pass, and it just says freelance, and they say, who are these pictures going to? And you got a lot of nerve coming up here being media. And I said, who's it going to? And I go, wire services or whatever. And they don't know what that means. And they're like, okay, we're blogging.
Well,
I mean,
let's.
I was told there were a couple, like Chris, concur you, I heard that a couple of the post photographers really got worked over.
Yeah.
I saw Lucian Perkins out yesterday, and he was not wearing, he's not with the Post anymore. He's got 2 Pulitzers, and he was not wearing any identification.
Yeah, I think wearing identification in this day and age is not a good idea. I've also seen people wear those, they look like press flak jackets and things like that, and they have helmets with press on them. that just made them a target. However, some of the situations I put myself in, like yesterday, I mean, I think, you know, having goggles for pepper spray and even a gas mask would be beneficial. But you know, you don't really need a helmet until you need one, right? So I mean, that's up for you to decide. I don't have a helmet to wear like that, but you know, I'm rethinking the helmet thing, but I would use something more like a bicycle helmet or something. But definitely want to invest in some goggles for sure.
I'm going to show you something. It's unfortunately backwards. What I did to back up what Chris was saying about knowing who you're working with. When I'm at a BLM thing and I wear that generally, the mask I wear is this. It says Black Lives Matter. I did not wear that yesterday. I would have been beaten up.
Oh, totally.
So I wear one that just looks like a camera.
So let's talk about, and I saw this as well in 2017, where Antifa or whoever you want to call them got into it with photographers, and mostly because they were asking people, you know, ask permission before you take our photos. And of course, we know as documentary photographers and photojournalists that's not something that we typically do on a public street. But that has become something that's been discussed over the summer, and that is identifying people in photos, because as we know, the FBI is looking to look at photos to try to identify people. I saw Mukul post a photo to his Facebook today, and it was a picture, and I've got it, and I can show it if you'll give me permission, Mukul. But there was people climbing a wall, and it looked like you had digitally blurred their faces. Tell us a little bit about your decision to do that.
So I don't know what people think, and I'd love to hear everybody's views on this whole thing that's going around, that, you know, the FBI or someone is scraping social media to identify people. I don't know if that's really true or not. It's just a rumor. But mostly I did that because people are getting worked up over it. So it's not because I think the FBI is doing it, but it's just to avoid people sort of getting freaked out about, you know, having their photos posted. And I feel kind of like if I take photos of people, they're sort of trusting me with it. I don't want to be, you know, exposing them or doing something to harm people, because I'm not here to judge people or whether they're right or wrong. That's the law has to decide that, you know.
But you're not blurring every photo you take. You just blurred, I guess, people climbing the wall. Is it because you thought that they might be arrested for that?
Their faces were clearly visible, so I think they could be identified. And a lot of the other faces are not that clear, or it doesn't look like they're doing something illegal, you know, that they're just milling around.
I see Maurice Scott, who worked on Unprecedented and is working on Transition. Maurice, you're in the audience or in attendance. You were, I recall some of the photos that you took were right there with sort of the police action. And I know you've shot in DC for quite some time. Tell me, have you been out much since the inauguration photographing, and how did your experiences at the inauguration 2017 change the way you approach these events?
Well, I've been out to a few other protests since the inauguration and taking photographs, but the inauguration was very special. It was kind of chaotic. It was very intense. I know a lot of people were talking about Antifa earlier. I had my run-ins with Antifa as well, a couple scuffles with them. But for the most part, I think I was fortunate. I had the police protecting me a lot of times. I don't know why or how. I met a couple of the police officers. We started talking, and they started telling me, like, hang with me. They started warning me about things. Said, like, no, don't go there, come back away from there, because we're going to do this. So they were looking out for me. So I kind of stuck around with them. I think I wasn't there yesterday, but I watched a lot of it on television. And I'm thinking that for me, what it looked like, the inauguration was a lot worse as far as violence. But this one, I think this one was it was just a different level, and it kind of concerns me because I think there are more things that may come up that we have to keep an eye out for.
You mean it during the inauguration coming up, or?
Well, no, what happened yesterday. And so I was thinking there are more things probably coming up to keep an eye out for as well, as photographers.
And if any of you are out there are wondering, Maurice is a voiceover actor, so that's why he has such a rich baritone there.
Thanks. But, actually, I should add also this year I haven't been out as much, or I haven't been out at all. Actually, when I came back from Paris in January, I came down with the illness. I actually had COVID in January of last year.
Oh,
I was
wow.
in the hospital for about 2.5 weeks. So I'm just now back, getting up and getting out and about.
Wow. Well, I'm glad to see you're up and doing better. That's yeah. Hopefully, there's a light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to this pandemic. But let's talk about health, and we're still in a pandemic, and it's worse than ever. I avoided going out to a lot of the protests earlier because I just don't want to be out in crowds. I don't want to, even with a mask on. I did go out for the first time at the when Biden clinched. I felt the need to get down there, and I masked up, and I even put goggles on. But I know some of you out there are still not going out to photograph in crowds. Those of you who aren't, you can. I'm love to hear some of your thoughts. But others who have been out to some of the protests against racial injustice and some of the other protests over the summer, and some of the stuff we've seen this fall. Tell us how you approach it as far as protecting yourself, and do you feel like you're at risk out there? Mike Lands?
I went double masked
Double masked.
to the Trump rally.
It's Arpita here. So I went to a lot of the Black Lives Matter protests, and also the post-inauguration celebrations, and through June, end of June. So I went with trepidation, and I was not, there was some resistance from family and friends, or should you be going out there? But I just made sure to always wear a mask and not be completely in the thick of things for too long a time. So I would just go in, take some photos, and then move out, be on the sidewalks. So for me, it was a question of, I think, constantly moving. So, but every time I went, I was somewhat uncomfortable with being in the crowd, even though it was outside. But I went many times, and then 7 days later, I didn't have any symptoms, or anyway. So
we should note here that Arpita is a scientist as well. So you come from it with a scientific background.
Right. Yeah. So some of my research actually involved immune cells and stuff like that. So I know some of the inner details, but I didn't venture to any of the Trump marches and rallies because I was more uncomfortable.
I was more nervous yesterday than at previous rallies. I had to get myself tested after the incidents and the George Floyd stuff in late May. But the marchers were wearing masks, even though it was closed. Yesterday, 50-60% of the people are not masked. So there were a couple times it made me quite nervous because I get in the thick of it. I get right in the middle of it. I was wearing masks. I periodically would split. If I knew I was close to people, on top of the mask as my arm get around them. I'm actually a little nervous about tomorrow. Yesterday, I think I'm going to be okay, but at the Biden victory rally and the stuff the night before, everybody's masked, or 98% of them are masked, and people are aware of social distancing and act in a more responsible manner. Yesterday, actually, I didn't get a shot of it, but there was a woman I saw wearing a mask. This mask is as useless as my government. but she was wearing it.
She was wearing it.
Totally, you know. But I think with the Trump folks, it's something that I'm certainly being more aware of. I had hand spray, sanitizer with me, and I wore gloves at all times.
Do you disinfect your cameras after you come back from an event like that?
I should have, but I didn't.
I think early on, when this pandemic was happening, that was the big discussion in photography circles is how to sanitize your gear when you come back from
Joe?
Yes.
Can I say something? So I work on this stuff, coronavirus too. I've been working on it for like over a year at NIAD. So the couple of things. One is it's getting really scary right now because there are new strains circulating in the US, which are more infectious. Plus, we have huge numbers of cases. So the incidence is just sky high right now, highest it's ever been. So people need to be careful. The other thing is, masks generally, I don't know, I don't want to be controversial here, but generally they're not supposed to be protective. They can prevent transmission to some degree, but they don't really protect you that well. So I don't want people to get the wrong impression that if you're wearing a mask, you're somehow protected. You have to keep a distance from people and stay away from people who are yelling. So the biggest transmission things are happening through aerosol, where people are actually verbalizing loudly or yelling, singing, those kinds of things. Outdoors is much, much safer than any kind of enclosed space. So keep those factors in mind as you go through this. Avoid sort of really crowded, dense areas and stay away from people who are shouting.
So let's stop there for a second. And I want to recognize that Mukul is on the staff at NIH, right? And you work on it.
I work in Dr. Fauci's institute, yeah.
Right. But you are all at every one of these things that I've seen. So are you wearing an N95 or what? How do you feel about that sort of?
I'm a little bit confused about the whole thing because after the first protest that I went to, I was 100% convinced that I should have gotten based on everything that I knew. Then I came back, I got tested. Every protest I go to, I come back, get tested, and I've been negative. So I don't know what to make of it, except that maybe being outside is better and that I'm somehow keeping enough of a distance to avoid it. The first one that I went to, people were getting tear gassed. Everybody's coughing on top of each other, and I was convinced that I was going to catch it. But maybe at the time the incidence was not that high. But right now, it's really kind of scary in terms of what's happening in the US.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, suspect, I remember reading on your Facebook page when you went out to shoot for the first time, you had actually isolated yourself for much of the spring. Why did you finally decide to get out and start taking pictures again?
Oh, because after the first large BLM protests, I was convinced they were going to be mass spreader events based by everything that I heard on the media. And then when, DC showed that they really had no rise from those events, I was like, hey, well, if I'm wearing a mask and stay away from, people who are screaming or what have you, it's probably fine. And as I say, I've been double masking. I don't know, I don't know if there's any science on that, but cool. But at least I feel a little more secure about that. But yeah, no, for a long time I was like, I don't want to go out there and risk getting this illness and passing it on to my family or other people. But I've also been going out on these kind of massive bike rides with a couple hundred people, usually once a month in DC. And you're moving and you're obviously mostly 6 feet apart or more because you're biking. And so that gave me a little more confidence too, as well. And so, yeah, so, and the Biden win, I just had to go. So that was the first time I ventured out, was during actually election night I went out. Mm-hmm. And then the Biden win. And then, and then I went to the December 12th Trump rally. So.
Anybody else?
You don't have to worry so much about the surface thing. That was an initial scare, but now they say transmission is very rare through surfaces. So don't get paranoid about having everything wiped down and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I've been microwaving my cameras a lot.
Uh,
I wonder what that does to the sensor.
Oh, I use film, dude.
Oh, there you go. That'll work.
so, I didn't really plan on doing this book, the book that we're going to be working on, Transition. I figured, just it might be a good idea, but on the day that Biden clinched, I just felt sort of overcome with the moment, and I said, okay, we're going to do this thing, we're going to do this book, and then I think reality starts coming in, and I'm are we going to have enough to photograph on Inauguration Day? Is there even going to be an inauguration? Is it going to be all virtual? How do we make a book out of that? And that's one of the reasons I kind of expanded the scope of this book to go all the way from October, so we can capture some of these things that are happening, and we'll have enough images to fill the book. But what I'd love to hear, like, what some of y'all are expecting to see on Inauguration Day, and we may actually be in for a wild ride in the 10 or so days, up until inauguration. But I see Dwight Jefferson out there. Dwight, you're in Arizona now, I guess, a red state. Are you getting out to shoot a lot of the protests there? Are you going to come visit us in DC on Inauguration Day?
I wish I could. It's really a desert out here in more ways than one. I'm in Tucson and not in Phoenix. A lot more stuff goes down in Phoenix. So I am planning on taking a couple trips up there just to see what's going on, because there's nothing happening in Tucson.
Excellent. Who else hasn't spoken for who's on our book team here? I see Mickey Jordan out there. I see Lisa Walker, Pablo. Share some of your thoughts on how you're going to be approaching Inauguration Day this year.
Hey, Joe, it's Mark. Figured I might chime in if you don't mind. My guess is, I guess a lot of it does depend on what happens in the next 10 days, especially with Trump still in office. But I would assume that we'll probably see the Proud Boys back again. Maybe not obviously at the National Mall, because I suspect the security is going to be extremely tight, but maybe at other areas. So I think we might see something similar to what we saw 4 years ago, except instead of it being mostly Antifa, it's going to probably be more of, the far right's protesting because they're going to feel that Biden is an illegitimate president. So I think that's going to be one area for us to look at, because like everyone said, we don't know, given what just happened, we don't know how they're gonna handle this, if it's going to still be done on the west side of the Capitol or not.
Yeah, I think we won't see the inauguration balls. I don't think we're going to have a big crowd on the mall. So it's going to be a little different, and it'll be a little challenging to make pictures. But I think there's going to be that combustible element, because I do think some of the Trump supporters will be back, but this time I think people are going to feel a need to get outside to mark the moment with celebration. To go down to BLM Plaza, to be at the White House. So there will be crowds, and I guess the question will be, will the police, keep them apart? Where can we see conflict? I mean, obviously we didn't expect to see what we saw 4 years ago. Ben Eisendrath, I know you're going to be working on our transition book. How are you going to approach Inauguration Day?
I'm going to hit the neighborhoods because I think the same thing. I think there's going to be almost nothing in the mall and around there, but I think I'll sort of, I like sort of street portrait approach. So I'm going to want to see regular locals and, some visitors in small groups, preferably.
I think you raised a really good point there that I want to touch upon, and that is that this book, the first book, Unprecedented, really focused on downtown DC. For this time around, we are widening it because we wanted to capture things that are happening all over the country, things that are happening in the neighborhoods, things that are happening in people's homes. I mean, this is a different world than 4 years ago. And the other thing that will be the challenge as we put this book together is what is the narrative of this book? You know, I don't want the narrative to be necessarily the Trump protests that we saw yesterday. I think it's part of the book. It's going to be maybe a significant part of the book, or you know, but it's not going to be what drives this book. I do feel like this book, I want the overall tone, and again, we'll have to make that decision based on everything that we look at from all the photos that are submitted. But I do want it to be more, you know, looking forward a little bit in there. I want it to recognize that this is a historic event with Kamala Harris's, you know, becoming the vice president of the United States. I think that there's still, you know, we can't ignore the divisions that are going to be here long after President Trump is gone. So there's, you know, Ben, thanks for saying that in the neighborhoods, you know, this storytelling that we're going to be doing isn't going to be just in downtown DC or around the White House. It's going to be everywhere. It's going to be in Arizona where Dwight is. It can be I don't think Ruben is on this call, but you know, it'll be in Brooklyn. You know, it'll be all over the place. So if you're out there and you're interested in participating in this project, we do have an open call that's going to be going on that's launched today for people to submit work. And some of our, you know, some of my favorite photos from the first book, Unprecedented, came from the open call. We had about 28 photographers working on the Unprecedented project, and we did an open call as well. And I think about 10 photographers, we chose photos from 10 photographers to appear in the book. And there were some really good images that we picked up from that open call. So I think Shelley's going to drop a link to where that open call is as well.
Hey, Joe.
Yes.
Some breaking news that actually impacts what we're talking about. So Trump just released a video where he's actually now calling for a peaceful transition and the end to the stuff. So it's going to be interesting. I think my approach is going to be to monitor the news really closely to see what's ticking, because if he continues, and there's no telling what he'll do from minute to minute, but if he continues in this mode, the reconciliation mode, then there really might not be that much of a presence of Trump supporters. They might end in resignation, and just stay away, not in disgust, but still just stay away. You know, but then it's going to be interesting to see. I also am curious how the progressives are going to react. How you know, there's already been a big split, you know, with the Merrick Garland appointment, where the progressives are really unhappy about that, and thinking that Biden's just going to sell out to the midstream. So I'm sort of curious how they're going to react when there's going to be a thing going on. I'm also wondering what Antifa is going to do during this, because I don't think we've seen the last of Antifa now that Trump's gone.
Yeah, I think that's the bottom line, is that you know, we just don't know. We don't know. We don't even know what the next 10 days is. I think that you know, President Trump faces the real possibility of perhaps getting removed before his term is over, even though it's only 10 days. So I think that might be influencing some of his decisions there as well. I want to share a couple. What we haven't looked at any photos, so I'm gonna actually pull up some photos from the first book. Let me.
Hey, Joe, before we get to that, I'm curious about your ideas regarding the sequencing of the book and how you plan to incorporate, you know, everyone's images. So, for example, is everyone going to get an image in the book that's participating, or is there,
No.
Is it going to be in a chronological order, like Unprecedented was, basically? How are you planning on doing that?
It's a good question, Chris. No, we definitely probably not going to have room to put everybody's images in there. So, for those who don't know, our organization, the organization is publishing this book. It's called Focus on the Story. We're a 501c3 organization that is dedicated to supporting impactful visual storytelling. So we have a board of directors. A couple of them are here on the call tonight. Jason Hammaker's on our board. And I think he made that joke earlier. But I think we'll probably look at the pictures. Cherie May, Kurth Bob, Shelly Han. I'm sorry, Shelly, you're on the board and you're here on this call. Chantel Wong. We'll all probably go over a lot of the photos and talk about which ones should be in the book and which ones shouldn't, or kind of the bottom line is we're going to the photos that stand out, the very best photos, are probably going to be put into one pool. Is okay, we have to figure out the sequencing but they're going to include this photo because it's just too good to leave out of the book. In some cases, there might be a photo that just doesn't fit the sequence that has to be left out. So that's going to be, it's going to be a tough decision. It's hard to say at this point because I haven't, even the people who are going to quote unquote participate, the yourself and other photographers, haven't really submitted the photos to me. So I don't have, ability to sort of lay them out and kind of see what the narrative is. I think, the title of the book is Transition. So what, it's in my mind, it's a little bit of how, this transition from what we've experienced in 4 years into a into whatever's next. So sequencing in chronological order is it may be that way. There may be we may take some things out of order. There may be a section that deals with sort of the celebration aspect of it. I think there would definitely be a section that deals with some of the counter protests and how that's going to be. It's going to come out in the end is probably a question I can't answer at the moment, right? With Unprecedented, I knew going in it was going to be 3 days. The original title for Unprecedented, the working title was 3 days in January, because it was going to be, okay, this is the 3 days that we're going to be looking at. This is a lot more this is going to be a lot more challenging, because it would be, the easy thing would be chronological, but I'm not going to tie myself down to that at this time. I think we'll just, first we got to start seeing some of the images, when we start seeing them, hopefully, we can start pulling them and putting them into sequences that go well together. So, I mean, yeah, that's kind of my non-answer to your question, or as much as I can at this time.
Well, it's probably better to go in without any preconceptions of what you want until you see the material that you're working with. So you may find, juxtaposing images of Antifa with Trump supporters from different dates and protests and cities or whatever, could actually be more impactful than if it was just like, this is what happened on December 12th or something.
I do agree that's one of the reasons, not just because we need the material, but one of the reasons that we're going outside of DC is because this is America's moment, right? This isn't just DC's moment. The action's happening here in DC, but this is being felt everywhere. It's not only being felt here. So it's hard to say, because it's always unknown what images you're going to get from where. With the open call, because very few of us had credentials, none of us were there for the actual on the mall or on the steps of the Capitol for in 2017. But the open call, there was I don't think he's here on the call, but Joel Richard, a local photographer, also is on the staff of a congressman, was on the steps. So he got this photo of Obama and Trump together, and that made the book. So for me, this is a moment of celebration for Black Americans, for South Asian Americans. There could be a picture of a portrait of someone who's really touched by this moment. A South Asian family in Seattle could celebrating in their home. I'm just making that completely up off the top of my head, but that's, I want to be open to that. That's not necessarily going to be driven by protests. You know, this is going to be, I think, just the nature of the book. We're going to have a lot of people in the streets. We're going to have a lot of people. We're going to have pictures from yesterday that make the book. But you know, I also am, like you said, not going into it with preconceived notions necessarily. But I do want to encourage people to put moments in there that have nothing to do with the protest. You know, that could be quiet moments of reflection or celebration. Things that are happening in the neighborhood. That's going to give a different dynamic to what we do with this book. And Shelley, if you're able to drop the actual copy of Unprecedented into the chat, you can click on that and go see how that book was put together. But the Unprecedented, we had the day before the inauguration, which was going to be President Obama's last day in office. And you know, in my mind, that day was going to be about people sort of, sad to see Obama going. And in fact, we did have some of those pictures, but we didn't realize that night that it would be like some mini scuffles and some protests going on that would cause, police interaction and tear gas and people, pushing and shoving and getting pepper sprayed. The next day, the middle chapter, the biggest chapter, was on the actual inauguration. And we knew there was going to be a lot of civil disobedience. We knew there was going to be a lot of peaceful protests, and we knew there was going to be celebration. So it was interesting that we were able to juxtapose a lot of my favorite sequencing in that chapter, are putting some of the Trump supporters opposite of the people who are not happy. And then we were lucky enough last time to have that third day, which was the Women's March, and that was just an amazing experience to see, some 600,000, 650,000 people, crowding the streets of DC. So that it was easy to break that into three separate chapters. And I think it's going to be challenging. I think we got to kind of see what comes in. I follow people's feeds in your Facebook and your Instagram, so I kind of know what people have been shooting up to this point. Obviously, we spent a lot of time talking about yesterday, and I know that's going to be in the book. But then, I think 50% of it is probably going to be around the inauguration day and Trump's last day in office, and what we can do. I think the challenge is, as visual storytellers, I challenge all of you, is to go out and get the unusual or the unexpected shots, right? Up until that moment, I think there will be a lot of crowd shots of people celebrating, people protesting. Maybe there will be some images coming in from the election. That's part of the transition as well, the people who are voting. So there could be some good images from that as well. So I'm going to keep an open mind on it. One lesson I learned from last time when we did Unprecedented, I rushed. I wanted that book out I wanted to beat everybody with our book. And we designed that thing and got it back from the printer by May, right? A couple months. That book was back to us. And we had a big gallery exhibit at Gallery O. This time, I'm not going to put that pressure on our organization. I've set August as the day that I hope to have the book back, or as the month that I hope to have the book back. We may get it back earlier, and that'll be great. But I definitely, we're going to take our time a little bit with this one in terms of, deciding how it's going to look and how it's going to be laid out, et cetera. So, yeah, good question. So let me find, okay. So yeah, I want to just, before we wrap it up, I did want to share some images from the first book, and some of the photographers who took them are in the, are on this call. I mean, we might just spend a little bit of time talking about them. Can you guys see my screen now? Do you see?
Yep.
Yeah, we can see.
Yes.
So this is Dwight. You took this picture, right, Dwight?
Yeah. I was just thinking about it actually yesterday and today.
One of my favorite photos from the book, right? And we made a decision for the book to go black and white. Every image in the book is black and white. This book is not going to be solely black and white. We'll have some color photography in it. But for this image, Dwight, I don't know to this day. They're passing a joint? Is that right? Tell me how this photo developed and what you were doing when you took it.
Yeah, I'd been following the protest around as we got moved by the police, and a group of people just decided to just sit down and not take any more being pushed around. They weren't being violent or anything, but I just thought it would be cool to get a backlit shot of the cops and just some people being peaceful. You know, there were some skirmishes, but not necessarily in this location. But I just thought it'd be a cool shot of a peaceful moment per se.
I thought it was a really cool shot as well.
It could have been a joint. I don't recall smelling anything. But
and I guess
we could add that to the story.
That was right when the decriminalization had just taken effect or hadn't taken. I don't know. Not that it matters. Lisa Walker, I saw you in attendance. This is one of my also favorite photos from the book. You know, and sometimes it's hard to get these crowd shots and actually make them of something besides a crowd. But there's so many elements in here that I like. Tell us about this photo and how it came about.
Well, that Women's March, like you were saying, you know, having that the day after, it was really pretty spectacular, you know, and I really enjoyed. I managed to just get a good spot kind of at the end. I'm pretty sure this is on Mass Ave, kind of up a little bit, and the crowd was just, I mean, massive amounts of people, you know, coming towards you. But fortunately, in this situation, it was very peaceful. And, you know, there wasn't any fear. I didn't have any concern about, you know, tear gas or, you know, something violent happening, which was a huge relief. So just had a really good angle kind of from above, and just kind of had to wait and see, you know, what there was all these crazy signs, which were really kind of funny. I mean, it was, you know, so I just kind of got a real, and of course the Capitol being in the background down there, but yeah, it was a lot of fun. It's the first time I've ever really been in a crowd that large photographing for myself. So I know many of you have. So, and I hate to say this, I haven't really been, by the way, down in DC that much. I've been staying with my mom up in New Jersey during a good part of this whole COVID scenario. So, and I've just been a little afraid because she's elderly that I have been a little nervous about kind of going down into some of those protests, like you said, with unmasked people. So I've been up here a little bit more, but I've been craving getting out there, and I'm hoping, you know, for as we get a little closer to inauguration, I definitely want to be participating, and I might be doing kind of what I think it was Ben or someone saying, I might be trying to go into those neighborhoods a little bit more to get a feel and a vibe of what's happening in the city. And this was obviously, you know, this is just people came from all over the world. It was massive, and it was spectacular.
It was a sight. I mean, I've been in a lot of these things in DC, and that was as many people as I've ever seen.
That's the biggest I've ever seen too.
Yeah.
If I don't mind butting in on this, I ran into Roy Lewis at the Women's March, and Roy's about 15 years older than I am, and his first demonstrations were photographing the King March back in '63. And we both had been at moratoriums in Vietnam War. We stood up, we're up on a high point. We both looked, I said, Roy, you ever seen anything bigger than this? And we both started going to Mode in '69, and then we both, no, this is bigger than anything we've ever seen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really something. It's just so many great pictures here.
Maurice, this is your image, and I was actually standing close to you when this happened. This is, I think, over by like Ellen 12. And this is just about 10 to maybe 20 minutes before all hell broke loose. Tell us about this shot, because there's just such malevolence here with this, I think it's a woman being pushed. What caused that to happen, and how did you get shot?
It's actually a young man. I don't know if you can see like the yellow tape around the close to his legs.
Oh yeah.
So the police actually had a group of protesters and journalists on the other side that they had arrested, and they were waiting for the police cars. And they had put a yellow tape on the opposite side of the street and told everyone to stand behind it. This young man starts walking down the street, ignoring the police and mocking them, and they're telling him to get on the other side. And no one's doing anything at first. But then this one officer decides just to step out and shove him into the crowd. So he shoves him and then takes him away in the squad car.
Interesting. We've never discussed this picture, so I didn't know that. And not until this moment did I realize that he's on the other side of a yellow police tape as well. So interesting context that adds to this.
Amazing shot. Amazing shot.
Thank you.
All right. This image is from Muko. You've talked about this before, so but I have to share this with folks because as you can tell, this happened, I think inauguration night, right? This
Right.
man with a tie is a Trump supporter who got caught in the crossfire as police started to spray protesters with pepper spray. And I guess the protesters came to his aid to help him flush the thing. But there's so many great elements of this image that I like. Muko, tell us again how this came about.
Yeah, so I saw this guy coming up. He looked really pretty colorful with, his, red, white, and blue colors. And he was all like dandied up. He was obviously coming from one of the Trump parties. And that was sort of the amazing thing about inauguration night is, there were people from all walks. There were protesters, there were people who were celebrating, and everybody's like kind of mixing in the streets. So he came up to K Street where the protest was going on in front of the Washington Post building. And there was a line of police holding the crowd at bay. This guy went right up to the front, completely clueless about anything, thinking I'm going to go and take a look. And as he went up there, the police sort of just let loose a spray of, tear gas into the crowd. So he got it straight in the face and he fell right down on his knees. Because if you've been sprayed with this stuff, you get like, even the gas, it's pretty bad. But if you get the liquid onto you, that it's really pretty devastating. So he was just completely incapacitated. So a bunch of protesters actually pulled him to the side, away from the police. And then two of the people started helping him. And this guy on the right, who's looking at him, you can see his face over there. He's telling him, hey, man, look, we're not all bad people, right? We're like helping you out over here. And this guy was like, yes, I can't breathe. And the other folks are telling him, keep your eyes open, keep your eyes open, open your mouth, keep breathing. And they finally took care of him and took him out, from that panic state.
Yeah, one of my favorite pictures, one of my favorite stories, and just the baptism symbolism here and everything is really good job. Thanks for.
And it looks great in color.
Chris, always on the lookout for something funny.
True.
Tell us what happened here.
Oh, here, let me try my
Lama
video.
wasn't really giving an interview, right?
So yeah, I really enjoy finding humorous situations when I can manufacture them. So this was actually inauguration day at like 7:30, maybe 7:45 in the morning, I think. On 7th Street, where I managed to actually get through security to get on the mall, but this was on the way into that. And I saw this guy walking with a llama. And then I saw the Russian TV reporter there interviewing the guy. And I was like, man, I wonder if I can actually make it look like he's interviewing the llama. And, at that time was really sort of like when fake news started to enter our parlance, if you will. So to me, this was like, you're, the source of the fake news, and this is the source is the llama. So it was sort of like a play on that. So, I just angled the camera to block out the guy that was actually getting interviewed. Part of me wonders if it would have been better if the focus was on the llama, but I was really just focusing on making sure you could read Russia there. But anyway, it came out pretty good. People really love this photo over in Eastern Europe.
And I guess this is an example as well of bringing sort of your street photographer sensibility to all types of events like this. This is like,
I think street photography has trained me well to look for things beyond what's being depicted in the frame. So like I said, I was, this picture for me is not about it's sort of a joke, but it's also, to me, it's a statement on fake news. So and I was able to do that by creating the illusion of this llama being interviewed by Russian TV.
I don't think Chantel is on the call, but I do want to bring her cover photo up real quick. I also, obviously have no idea what our cover photo is going to be this time around, because I haven't seen the images yet, and I'm not going to go into it with a preconceived notion. I mean, we went over like several different possibilities for a cover photo, but I finally settled on this one because this young kid with a what the fuck, WTF America hat and holding the American flag up just seemed to me to kind of illustrate sort of a little bit of everything we just went through over the 3 years. Chantel was in Georgia working down there for on the campaign. I don't think she's back. She was running a little late. So so that, that's the question, is I have no idea what the cover is going to be yet, right? Because I think the cover is going to have to really just play into whatever the narrative is. I'm hoping that there's some that it's not going to be an incredibly angry book, but that may be the story. I don't know. So we'll see what comes from that. I did talk about the open call, and one of the pictures I liked a lot from the open call is this one from Tatiana Gulinkina. There's just a lot of, and I know she's not on the call, but this to me was a great capture, right? I mean, just the sort of the eyes locking and sort of that. Honey, I'm on the call. Okay, what is up? This is my daughter, everybody.
Poppy?
Yeah.
Why is there only boys here? There must be a girl.
You're right. We need to find some girls, because girls can be photographers too, right? They're better photographers.
I'm not a boy.
And she makes a very good point. So let's see, what else did I pull before this? And what we're looking for humor. We're looking, it's not all serious. This photo always kind of cracked me up, just because of able to capture that moment of sort of this perplexed look and the "Not My President" hat on, and the police sort of in the background. So yeah, I mean I think there's a lot of room for creativity, as we saw in some of these photos. Definitely some opportunities for drama, and I think that's the challenge I would put out to everybody on this call. If you want to participate in this project, go out there and make great photograph first, and second, look for something that's not going to be your standard shot. Not going to put a lot of people holding signs in the book, or try not to, because that's, to me, sort of a boring shot. people holding signs. Hopefully we'll get some images that help tell that story of the transition. That's the key. You know what? It's just a incredible moment in history, and these two books, I hope, sort of bookmark a time that that we'll, you know, be talking about, you know, when we're all old and gray and looking back 20, 30 years from now about the things that we witnessed. Hopefully, you know, we have no idea what the world's going to be like. So let's cross our fingers there. I want to thank everybody for coming out. I want to thank Tom Petzwinkler, Susie Bauer, Shelley Hahn for helping behind the scenes with some of the tech stuff here. I want to thank all of the photographers who participated in Unprecedented and who are coming back for to work on transition. It was just such a great experience working with everybody the first time around. You know, looking forward to seeing what people submit this time around because I know there's going to be some great work. I've seen some great work, you know, over the course of the past several months. So it's going to be interesting. You know, I think Chris touched upon this earlier. It's going to be a little tougher to get into this book than the last one. But we'll see. I think there's that's a challenge, you know, to go out there and make it happen. For those of you who didn't participate in the book but joined us, you know, thank you for being out here, and I hope you know, check out our Kickstarter project. We're talking like this is going to be a book, but it may or may not be a book depending on whether the Kickstarter is successful. If the Kickstarter is successful, it will be a book. If not, we'll probably still pull some images and create an exhibit for our photo festival, which happens in June, the Focus on the Story International Photo Festival. So at the very least, we will have an exhibit, if not a book, but hopefully we'll have that book come June.
Hey, Joe.
Yeah.
I got two questions. One, where's the Kickstarter at now? And what are your recommendations for promoting the project?
So when you say where the Kickstarter is at, I assume how much
you launched it today, and I saw it had almost $500 when I went to go look, so that was pretty good.
I think, well, I can tell you right now, I think we are somewhere around 2,000.
1604. It's in the chat.
Yeah, so we've you know, in less than 24 hours, we've gone about 12 or 13% of the book. I set the goal for this book is to raise 10,000. Last year in 2017 for Unprecedented, our goal was 5,000. Never published a book before, and we raised 19,000. So we were able to put that book together, able to print our exhibit, mount and frame our exhibit, and make a $2,000 donation to Critical Exposure, which is a organization here in town that helps youth, sort of empowers them through photography. One of my favorite organizations to support, criticalexposure.org. So we, you know, hopefully we'll have that same results here. You know, you just never know. If we raise 10,000, we'll be able to print that book. If we raise more, you know, that'll be great as well. But you know, share it on your Facebook pages. That seems to be the thing where a lot of people see things. You know, Twitter is not as great at you know, people don't typically click through from Twitter from what I've seen. But yeah, so Facebook, emails are probably the best. You know, you got family or friend, email the link out to the Kickstarter, and just ask them to support it. Go out there yourself and reserve your copy. One thing I have learned after doing 2 of these Kickstarter books, successful Kickstarter books, is that I've still got boxes of Unprecedented in my, well, now they're in my living room because I had a flood in my basement. So I have like, you know, 5 or 6 boxes of books, you know, still in, others in my shed for the second book. So this time I'm only going to probably order just enough to cover the Kickstarter obligations. So if you want a copy, that's probably going to be the only way to get it. But Yeah, thanks for asking. So hopefully we, this thing is a marathon, not a sprint. So 30 days, we're off to a decent start. Kickstarter named us today a project we love, which is a really great designation to have. Only a small percentage, less than 5% of the Kickstarter projects get that designation, and it's extremely important to have it because it puts you on the search page. It puts you on the home page. When people log into Kickstarter, they're going to see recommended projects, and we'll be on that now. So that was our goal was to get that, and we got it on our first day. So hopefully that'll help us. I feel like we can hit it. 10,000 sounds like a lot, but we're already a little bit of the way there, and still have 29 more days. So hopefully this book becomes reality.
It will.
But don't give it all away, Lloyd. We want people to be, to have some suspense here.
Joe.
Question.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So when you've got all these photographers and you're putting together a book that includes so many different styles, do you do anything with the editing to make the continuity flow better with the different looks?
Yeah, so that's going to be a challenge, right? With so many photographers. I mean, I don't know how many photographers will make the final book. Last time it was helped a little bit, I think, by the decision to go purely black and white. So it kind of took some of that style question and sort of conformed the images a little bit more to a black and white frame. This time, especially as I discussed earlier, like portraits of people in their homes are going to look a lot different than images of people climbing the wall at the Capitol. So that we'll definitely probably try to split some things up in that way. But yeah, it's not going to be a walk in the park as far as trying to figure out how to do that.
Hey Joe.
Yeah.
Somebody just asked a question. How do they get a copy of the first book? Maybe you can auction off the first book for like some price on the Kickstarter.
Well, there you go. If you go to the Kickstarter and you look at the rewards, there actually is a reward level where you can get both books. And my wife would really enjoy it, or really be happy if we were to do that, because then we could clear these books out of my my house that have been here for 4 years. Yes, Maurice.
By the way, I know you have contacted me a few times about my photos. Do you still have those?
Well, funny you should ask, Maurice. We had an exhibit. Our work was exhibit. Everybody had their photos mounted and framed, and everyone was supposed to take their stuff home. And now Maurice is asking me 4 years later whether I still have it.
I know.
I think I do, Maurice. Why don't you get in touch with me and I can get it to you.
Okay. Thanks.
No problem. Awesome.
Hey, so Joe, what I'd like to recommend, which is a little more work on your hand, but I think it would be helpful if you emailed all of us here involved in the call and anyone in the project, maybe some kind of templates and I guess imagery used to tease the new book. So we're all kind of, working off the same page consistently in a marketing sense.
Yeah, good.
Very good idea.
Actually, Chris, I do that for a living. So you're
sorry, I didn't mean to tell you how to do your job.
You're embarrassing me here by basically you're saying we should have a social media toolkit, and those are things that I often oversee in putting those together. So you're absolutely right. We'll get on that and distribute that to the team so that we can have some, typically maybe some suggested tweets, some suggested language for stuff in imagery like graphics and so forth. And we're going to have a video as well at some point. So awesome conversation. I really enjoyed seeing a lot of faces I haven't seen in a while, meeting some new people. Really appreciate you joining us tonight, and I'm looking forward to, as Lloyd said, we're going to do this book. It'll get done, and it'll be a great thing. And we're going to have an exhibit of some of the work will be exhibited in June during our photo festival, and it'll be an outdoor exhibit. So right now the plan is not to do a gallery exhibit, but to do an outdoor installation. And how that looks right now, we don't know whether it's going to be printed on vinyl or printed on water-resistant paper or something of that like. So we'll definitely do that. It probably is Jason Hammaker still on the call? It would probably be in Mount Pleasant, but we've got a couple other locations as well that that we're considering. Awesome. Looking forward to seeing everyone's images at some point, or looking forward to seeing you online. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to everyone. And please, if you're not on our mailing list, sign up and keep up with all the announcements. Take care.
All right. Cheers.